evening. You're watching a brand new week of Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Tonight, as the number of dead continues to rise in Nepal's devastating earthquake, has this tragedy also been a wake-up call for India? How prepared are we to deal with a disaster? How safe are our cities? That's going to be our big focus over the next 60 minutes. India. We've been talking for many years about whether India is prepared for a disaster of this magnitude, but after the massive tremors that many people felt, not just in the national capital but in other Indian cities as well, there is, I think, a genuine concern about what we would do if this was something that happened closer to home. Is India prepared to deal with a big earthquake? Joining us on the program tonight is Dr. Harsh Gupta. He's an Himalayan earthquake specialist, former secretary with the Ministry of Earth Sciences. M. Shashidhar Reddy, who was the vice chairman once of the National Disaster Management Authority until the new government came in last May. Mr. P.R. Bedia, the DGM New Delhi of the Seismology Department of the Indian Met Department. Mr. Sudhir Vora, urban planner and architect. Jay Panda, Lok Sabha MP of the BJD. Sambit Patra of the BJP, and our very own Pallav Bagla here in the studio with us. Dr. Gupta, if I could ask you first, sir, I think a lot of people, firstly, are concerned about whether something like this can happen again. There have been a lot of reports that this was a big earthquake, but the big one is yet to come. If you could weigh in on that, sir.
A very good question. The point is this, that this was a 7.8 or 7.9 magnitude earthquake, and the strains which have already accumulated in Himalayan region are capable of generating a 8+ magnitude earthquake. So, for me to say that a bigger thing cannot happen is difficult, but not as a sequel of this earthquake. There could be independent other earthquakes. Also, please note that whenever a 7.8 or 7.9 magnitude earthquake occurs, it will have aftershocks for a very long time. A typical example is the Sichuan earthquake of May 12, 2008, which was also magnitude 7.9. And it had aftershocks for almost 5 months of magnitude 5 and larger. So I think the situation that we have, these aftershocks will continue for several more months to come. And what becomes very important that we ensure that the buildings which have been already partially damaged, they should not be occupied so that, they could collapse with the aftershock.
So, Dr. Gupta, what you're saying is very important because there's been, a considerable degree of worry in India as well, and I think a certain amount of panic because of misinformation and rumors also. Whenever a tremor is happening, there was another one that happened earlier this evening, and I think people in Bihar and Assam felt it as well. So you're saying that these aftershocks could actually go on for several months, that this is not a fresh earthquake necessarily, and people shouldn't panic therefore?
No. These aftershocks are no indication that a bigger earthquake is to come. This is a very normal phenomena for a 7.9 magnitude earthquake.
I'd like to ask Mr. Bedia, though, about the rumor mongering and the misinformation, because all kinds of messages are going out on social media. Yesterday, an absurd message that NASA has predicted that at 8:06 p.m. there's going to be an earthquake. Please clarify once and for all, sir, that earthquakes cannot be predicted. Am I right?
Yes,
no one can predict an earthquake.
You are correct. At present, science has not developed it to a stage where we can give a prediction with a very accurate accuracy that where, when and of what magnitude earthquake can occur. Of course, some work is going on, but we are at a stage, at a very beginning stage, where we are just trying to find out what are the parameters which we can use for prediction in future any time. Maybe after 10 years, 20 years, or I don't know what is the time limit.
But at the moment, nobody can predict it.
At the moment, we can say work is going on, but success rate, I will say 0%.
Okay, so I think that is an important clarification that everybody should hear. Nobody can predict earthquakes, and if you're seeing messages on social media, on Facebook, on WhatsApp, SMSs that are being sent to you that are suggesting that NASA or any other agency is predicting an earthquake at some point, that is false, that is wrong. Please do not fall prey to rumors. I'd like to then ask...
Let me clarify. It's not just that India cannot predict.
Nobody can.
Neither the Japanese who are very prone to earthquakes, nor the Americans who have the US Geological Service on whom we rely for everything. Nobody can predict or forecast an earthquake. So that is the state of the science. But rumors travel much faster than earthquakes, and they create more panic than they should. And the social media has its bad side as well. And during this earthquake, we've seen the worst side of the social media, especially WhatsApp, where messages were traveling in such copious amounts saying an earthquake of this magnitude would happen at this time. The moon has come in an opposite direction today. All kinds of messages. And I clarified all day yesterday that
in fact, Pallav, as we speak, we're just hearing that the UP government has declared that tomorrow will also be a holiday for schools. They had done it as a precautionary measure today. You think that's a wise step, or does that add to the panic?
I think it's part of abundant caution, because what you don't want is that children are separated from families. And if there is a panic situation and children are in schools, and you've seen what happened in China, well, lots of children died when school buildings collapsed. And school buildings collapsed because there was a lot of corruption in China, and the school buildings were made of very poor quality. And I'm not reflecting on the quality of buildings here. Just that separation of children from families is certainly not a good idea. So while many seismologists have said this is an overreaction, but I think as part of abundant caution, it's not such a bad thing.
Okay, before I come to the politicians, Mr. Vora, if you could weigh in on this. The big question then is, if an earthquake of this magnitude was to strike, say, Delhi, what would happen, in your view?
We are not prepared for such an earthquake. Our buildings are not good enough to withstand such earthquake. I would say 90% of the buildings in Delhi are not designed for that category of an earthquake.
90%?
90%. We know that we are in earthquake zone 4 as a general zone, but we've got micro zones. We've got zones across the river, Noida and all that, where the soil is such that even with smaller earthquakes, the soil, what we call technically, liquefies. So we're not prepared. We haven't built our buildings. Not many of our buildings are built to take such a strong earthquake.
And that includes, the big high rises that everyone, advertises and, claims are earthquake resistant. Is there any such thing as earthquake resistant?
Well, buildings can be designed to be earthquake resistant to a certain level. Nobody can predict what size of earthquake can come. I remember after the 2001 earthquake, a lot of developers had started putting out advertisements saying that this is earthquake resistant and all that. But I don't think much real work has happened on the ground. There are, when you have private clients and people who are building their own buildings, they're very careful now because they know these things can happen. But I think as a general rule, in terms of developers or anything else, it's not happening. Peculiarly in America, in the US, the laws state that public buildings, things like schools and auditoriums and all, are designed to a different level of building code. The logic behind that is that in event of an earthquake calamity, these buildings which are excessively designed, over-designed, are actually meant for keeping people in, as shelters, etc. But we aren't in a great shape here in Delhi.
Okay, well, I mean, that's a very worrying sort of prognosis that you've given as far as, Delhi is concerned. Jay Panda, let me ask you then, in terms of political priority, is this something that needs to be debated and talked about in Parliament as well? I mean, is this something that we really need to focus on? I was reading today that there was a project under the National Disaster Management Authority that was supposed to have been implemented by the beginning of this year for basically making buildings disaster resistant and retrofitting old buildings. There was about 25 crores allotted to that project a couple of years ago, but nothing has happened. That project hasn't even taken off yet. Now that is despite having seen so many disasters in our own country. Your own state saw the super cyclone and dealt with the subsequent disasters much better. You see, Orissa was definitely much better prepared. Why is this not a priority issue politically, Jay?
Well, yes, of course it needs to be discussed in Parliament and debated. But let's not forget, it's not just our Parliament, it's democracies everywhere in the world are better suited to deal with urgent priorities of the day rather than important issues which may not be impending tomorrow but can have a long-term impact. And that's just the nature of democracy. But the fact is, as the experts have been pointing out, it's not just Delhi. Most of India does not have buildings that are built to withstand high-grade earthquakes. And it's not the earthquakes that's going to kill millions of people in India. It's going to be the buildings collapsing which is going to kill. And yes, we do need to do a lot of things. Now, you mentioned Odisha, and yes, of course, Odisha's handling of natural calamities has improved dramatically in the last 15 years. But here also I want to segregate. As a pilot myself who has done relief operations in the plains, I can tell you that the challenges in the mountains are much, much higher. So, for example, the kinds of helicopters which can do relief operations in Nepal are limited to very few, usually Army or Air Force models. So those challenges we have to deal with. So I think I would summarize as follows. In certain parts of the country, we have developed a great capacity to do preventive evacuation and immediate relief operations, and our army and armed forces have done that brilliantly besides states like Odisha. But when it comes to preparing for the long run, I think we are deficient. We desperately need to take steps on that front. And the other thing we need to do is, beyond the immediate relief and rehabilitation, the longer term reconstruction is something that also I think we need to improve.
But we have Mr. Shashidhar Reddy with us as well. But before I come to him, Jai Panda, do you believe that one of the big weaknesses that we have in the system is that there was a National Disaster Management Authority that was created? It doesn't have a vice chairman currently. It has 3 members that the new government appointed, but many of the other posts are lying vacant. Do you think the fact that the way it has been structured is a problem, or do you think the fact that there were actually, professionals that were appointed in a sense, rather than retired bureaucrats? This particular government looked at, I think there's an army man, a scientist, and another professional who are part of the NDMA. You think that's a better approach, or the way it was structured earlier?
Well, I think the issue of expeditiously filling top-level posts is not just limited to, this problem is not limited to the NDMA. I think it is an Indian problem that cuts across all ministries. We need to find ways of getting qualified professionals expeditiously appointed. But the role of the NDMA or the Home Ministry also ought to be in terms of coordinating other resources that we have. I was giving an example today in the Lok Sabha that Odisha has a lot of specialty in terms of water-based relief operations, boats, lifeguards, etc., because we are a coastal state. Some other states may have different capabilities. States which are in mountainous regions may have different capabilities. We don't have to duplicate our resources. We need to be able to harness the resources wherever they are available in India and use them wherever else they are required. But yes, of course, the issue of making sure that agencies like the NDMA are properly staffed in due time is critical.
In fact, I'll take that to Mr. Shashidhar Reddy, who was the vice chairman of the NDMA. Mr. Reddy, you in fact, I read a comment that you made after this Nepal earthquake took place, saying that the organization, that is the NDMA, had become dysfunctional after the new government came to power. If you could elaborate on that.
See, immediately after the new government took office, I met the Honorable Home Minister, Mr. Rajnath Singh, and requested him. I told him that, they could do whatever they want. It's a new government, they can have their own team. But I requested that there should not be any gap. There should be continuity. But, going by the way things were developing, governors were being asked to resign. I tendered my resignation. My colleague members were also asked to resign. And that was in June last year. And till about December 2014, for more than 6 months, everything was, lying dormant. 3 members were appointed. Meanwhile, the status of the vice chairman and the members, which used to be of a cabinet rank for a vice chairman and an MOS for the members, was downgraded, and the number also reduced. Now, I wrote to the Prime Minister requesting him to reconsider this when this was being talked about, but they thought this would be a better way of working. Well, I think looking back, I feel, with a lot of, I feel very bad. The kind of work was beginning to happen in NDMA. It's a new organization, no doubt, and then teething trouble and settling down. We started working, and the kind of work that has come out of NDMA for the 8.5 years that I was associated for the longest period of time, I think was something which is appreciated. Of course, I'm not saying that that was perfect. Yes, a lot more had to be done. And the biggest challenge, what everybody needs to understand today in this country, the people who run the government and everybody across the cross-section of the society, it's disaster management is not just rescue and relief. It's a very important phase of disaster management, but it's just a very short time that we focus on this. The major thing that the reason why an institution like an NDMA was created, and the reason why internationally the countries have been asked to have an institutional mechanism at the national level is to shift the focus from the rescue relief approach to a holistic approach to focus on prevention, to focus on
But
preparedness
Mr. Reddy,
and mitigation.
would some would say that rather than have a very large body in the NDMA, maybe having just 3 people doing the job will make it more efficient. You don't agree with that? You think having it structured the way it was earlier was better?
Yes, I mean, the problems were different. I mean, the reason why NDMA could not work more efficiently, there were different reasons. There was no cohesion between the Ministry of Home Affairs and NDMA. The kind of importance, every ministry has a role in this, and the coordinating role that NDMA had to play in bringing all these together, the guidelines that we have come up, they're monumental work. But nobody is implementing. Instead of giving a little more teeth and then trying to bring a more cohesion into this, not letting the MHA dictate to NDMA what needs to be done, interfering in everything. In spite of having a full-time secretary in the NDMA, everything is re-examined by an undersecretary when it goes to
okay, I think I understand the point that you're trying to make, and I'll take that to Sambit Patra. That Sambit, is disaster management something that therefore needs greater focus by the government, by keeping the vice chairman's post vacant, by restructuring the NDMA the way that you have? Mr. Reddy says that institution has been undermined. Is that a problem?
And even subjects are not allotted to the members who have been appointed about 3 months.
So I'll take that to Sambit Patra. Sambit.
Nidhi, I would like to begin my words by paying my homage to all those people in India as well as in Nepal who have lost their valuable life to this earthquake. And secondly, I would refrain from any kind of political talk today when the whole world is watching with sensitivity. No politics today. But with all my humility at my disposal, to Mr. Reddy, I would say, I do not know when the post of vice chairman would be filled, but I know that the chairman of the disaster management is working as a chairman has never worked before. We have seen that in a very short span of time of only 11 months, the kind of evacuation process, the kind of disaster management that this chairman, that is the Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has shown, it only implies that he's a very talented and experienced person as far as disaster management is concerned. Right from the Bhuj days to today, definitely he'll take steps to see to it that the disaster management team is made in such a way that India would be in a position to face any disaster.
Yes, but Sambit, the Prime Minister cannot micromanage everything, every disaster that happens, and therefore, Jay Panda, does there need to be someone full-time who's overseeing how the NDMA functions?
No, clearly the NDMA and many other, as I said, this cuts across the spectrum. You are seeing the difficulty in attracting talent to fill top-level banking posts. As I said, this cuts across the entire spectrum. Governments have a challenge in attracting talent because there have been allegations in the past when lots of appointments took place in many national-level bodies that the right people were not selected because of various deficiencies in the system. Let me put it quite bluntly. Yes, of course, the NDMA needs to have an operating head, and that does need to be expedited. But that takes nothing away from what Sambit was saying, is that the Prime Minister has set the example by immediately calling the crisis meeting himself within a couple of hours of the earthquake happening and setting in motion our intervention. So I don't think there's anything lacking on that front, but these are two separate issues. Yes, the NDMA does need to have an operating head.
Okay, so let me get back to the experts.
Once again, I come back to the point that disaster management is not just rescue and relief.
Yeah, as you said, it's a holistic approach, and therefore, Sudhir Bora, how important is it to have a fully functional NDMA with full-time members? Obviously, the Prime Minister has really taken an exemplary lead as far as Nepal is concerned. But tomorrow, if and when something happens in India, how much can he micromanage? How important is it to have an NDMA that it is functioning, completely separately?
I don't think it's only a disaster.
In 2011, we had sent a team to Japan.
One moment, Mr. Reddy. Sorry, this is for Mr. Bora. Yeah.
I don't think it's only an issue of disaster management. I think it's also an issue of how well we design our buildings and how well we build our buildings. And we know we are in certain kind of earthquake areas, and we're not the only place in the world who has earthquakes. We've got China, we've got California. We have the know-how, we have the technology. We know how to do it right.
We do know how to do it.
Yeah, we do. But on the other hand, Municipal government systems are not in place. Our building codes are not mandated properly. There is no structure in place to ensure that the right people who have the knowledge will design buildings and structures so that they can withstand such kind of disasters. And the common man doesn't have the wherewithal to do buildings properly. So it's Aam Aadmi, pardon my saying so, who suffers. I mean, even in Kathmandu, some of the newer buildings, which are the high-rise buildings, haven't suffered. They haven't come down.
The newer structures
haven't come down.
Yeah.
I know, I mean, Kathmandu is not the really example because it's been built out of brick and mortar and mud and timber and all that. But apart, even in Delhi or any part of India, we don't have pride in the way we design or construct our buildings. We don't think that far.
And so
we still think only square feet.
So, Pallav, if a 7.9 happened in Delhi, from your expertise and experience, it would be catastrophic.
God forbid if it happens anywhere in northern India.
Yeah.
One of the scenarios which was presented by an earthquake specialist was if an 8 magnitude earthquake happened, about 8 million people would die.
In North India?
Mr. Vora said 90% of Delhi would go down. One of the earthquake specialists told me 70% of Delhi will definitely go down if there is a 6 magnitude earthquake with an epicenter under Delhi, which is expected. Now, let me also add here what the earthquake has shown as a good part for India. Go back and see what happened during the tsunami in 2004. India mounted a huge relief effort. And the world woke up to the fact that India had tremendous capacity to launch ships all the way from Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Thailand within hours of the tsunami happening. And what happened after that? America woke up to the fact that India controls the entire seas south of in the Indian Ocean. And the Indo-US civilian nuclear deal was a fallout. As a fallout of this earthquake in Kathmandu, the world is going to see how India could mount a very large operation in northern part of India, especially a part where India is trying to counter China. So this is huge diplomacy and politics happening at the global level. And believe me, India may come out a winner in this, but God forbid if something like this happens in India, I don't think we are prepared at all.
International diplomacy is one thing, Mr. Vaidya, but I think then the question is about solutions. I mean, Mr. Vora says we have the technology, we have the know-how. When and where do we implement it? What will be the wake-up call for governments?
I think every time when such type of things happen, we talk about this thing. Now, we are talking about the prediction. Now, indirectly, we say that we have already divided the seismic zones. We have defined the seismic zones. This is
and
also
Delhi is the second highest risk.
This is also some sort of, you can say,
what about other
prediction, broadly prediction.
Chennai, Mumbai, how high is their risk?
They're not in zone 4.
Not as high as
we have a zone 4 situation along the Himalayan northern, the Norman belt, and we've had a...
So indirectly, we know that where earthquake can happen, what kind of damage it can happen.
You know that this is a vulnerable area.
So if we follow the proper building code and construction, I think this can be avoided. And there is no need to say that we can do prediction or not. And so these are the things which is already available. The knowledge is available, where are the vulnerable areas are there. So we have to stress on the building codes and its implementation. Mainly building codes are available, plenty of building codes are available, there are various agencies are there. But how to implement it and how strong the government is there for the implementation code, that is required.
Dr. Gupta, if you could explain to us, when we say Delhi is in zone 4, what does that mean? What is the likelihood, for instance, that Delhi could be hit with a big one in, say, the next 20 years?
Okay, I think Delhi does not have a fault which is capable of generating an earthquake of more than about 6 magnitude. But Delhi is equally vulnerable to earthquakes occurring in the Himalayan belt at a distance of 100 kilometer, 150 kilometer, and a magnitude 8 or plus earthquake there can create havoc in Delhi. So Delhi has to bother about earthquakes of up to magnitude 6 which could occur in Delhi, as well as earthquakes of magnitude 8 which could occur at a distance of 150 kilometers or so. Let me just point out two things. One, that in spite of technical developments, scientific developments globally, in the first 15 years of the 21st century, we have lost more lives in earthquakes than the entire 20th century. That is one fact. The second fact remains, that if we get a magnitude 8 earthquake anywhere in the Himalayan belt of India, I may say whether you talk of a repeat of the 1905 Kangra earthquake, repeat of 1897 Shillong earthquake, we are talking of a loss of up to 1 million human lives if it occurs in the middle of the night. This estimate has been made on the basis of the intensity of the past earthquakes. You put the typology of the houses, so you know how many houses will get destroyed. Then you put the layer of population density, so you can calculate how many people would be killed. As a matter of fact, in a seminar, in a global seminar, there was a prediction that any earthquake of magnitude 8 occurring in the vicinity of these earlier earthquakes would bring a big calamity to India. So we have to really prepare for that. And as you have discussed earlier, the building codes exist. The techniques are known. The main important question is that how do we implement those into our everyday life?
Dr. Gupta, I want to ask you a question. Again, many people have written and asked about this. What does one do when there's a big tremor? You know, what are the do's and don'ts, the three most important things people should do when a tremor happens? Because a lot of people make common mistakes. I think our instinct is to want to run out of our buildings. Some people may make the mistake of taking a lift. What should they do?
Okay, I start with a very fundamental thing, that when an earthquake occurs, you cannot think where you should go. So we should think ahead of time. Most of us will spend half of our day at our home and half of the day at our place of work, whether it is the office or a school or whatever. So we should have previously thought of that which are the safe places in these two places. Now, if you are living on a ground floor or a first floor, it is very good to get out into an open space if it is available. But if you are on higher floors, you would not have time to do that. So then there are places within your house, within your home, the corners which are much safer, and you should not get close to things which could fall onto you. The third thing which is very important, that not to panic. And then you can just take that you should duck below a cover, and if possible, if you get a pillow or something, cover your head with that. So with the collapse of the building, your head would not be injured. So if you take care of these 3-4 things, a lot of problems can be solved.
I think that's very important advice you've given there, sir. Although the don't panic part, I don't know how many of us would listen to that, because it's a natural instinct perhaps to panic. I just want a last comment from Sambit though. Sambit, on this issue of building codes, as every expert and everyone has pointed out on this panel, the codes exist. As Mr. Vora said, that we have the technology, everything is there, we know how to do it. But when does this become a priority for us? Is this going to be the wake-up call that the government needs to change things?
I'll tell you, Nidhi, when it becomes a priority, when politics is thrown out of safety of the country, then it becomes a priority. Because I'll tell you, about 2 months ago, on this very channel and most of the other channels, when the Delhi elections were going on, we were discussing as to which political party would come up to authorize the unauthorized colony. And all the political parties are busy saying that we would be the first one in authorizing the unauthorized colony. Please authorize them, but please see to it that they're retrofitted at least with the earthquake-resistant things. Because we all have gone into unauthorized colonies and we've seen that they do not have even the open space from where you can, where you can run to and save your life. So it's but natural that, keeping politics aside, the politicians have to think in a way which is statesmanly and visionary.
No, but it's about implementation. Mr. Vora was disagreeing with that point you were making, because
unauthorized colonies cannot be retrofitted. Unauthorized colonies don't have open space, they don't have any construction values. People are building them because they need shelter. Unauthorized colonies can just never be retrofitted.
So what do we do?
Nothing is right in them. You don't have open land in front of them, you don't have sewage space, you don't have place for services, leave alone retrofitting a structure of a building which has gone up by just brick and mortar. You just can't. You will tear the whole thing down to build it again if you have to.
I would bring to the fore the simple point. When there was a recent fire in the Parliament House, it came out that the Parliament House is not safe for fire protection. It doesn't have that measures. I'm not so sure how seismically proof or resistant is the structure of the North and South Block and the Parliament House. Have they done an assessment of what the status of the buildings is? They're old. Can they withstand a 6 magnitude earthquake happening right below Delhi, or an 8 magnitude earthquake happening 100 kilometers off Delhi? If they're not resistant to fires, if they're not protected to fire, God forbid, what would happen when a large earthquake happens even to the Parliament House?
I think the problem is that as a country, unfortunately, maybe we have never made fire safety, safety standards, whether it is in buildings, whether it's with fire exits or earthquake safety. We've just never made that a priority. Whether what has happened in Nepal will somehow change that at the moment is anyone's guess. But thank you to all of you for joining us on the program tonight. And Dr. Gupta,
I'd just like to make a short comment.
Yes, sir. I'll give you the closing remarks. Yes.
Yeah, you see, before we go any further, the first important thing is to make sure that the lifeline buildings are capable of withstanding the anticipated accelerations. The lifeline buildings are the hospitals, the schools, the police stations, the fire brigade,
exactly.
And there are techniques available. So that is the starting point. We should at least do that much.
Well, I do hope somebody in the government is listening to that. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us tonight. And